best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received, for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. Well, hello there, traveler. Welcome to the Lighthouse. Welcome, traveler. Always good to see you in the lighthouse, and I'm really glad you're here. It's always good to seek light, isn't it? Not always the easiest, but always good. It feels good when we are truly in that adventure. Now, do you remember the French Revolution, traveler? It's okay if you don't. It's one of the most unique times in history. Tremendous difficulties, tremendous moments of terror, and tremendous moments of heroism. It seems to be a time where the pendulum was on one end of the spectrum, and then it was swung to the other end of the extreme. Many changes were made that affected France and other neighboring nations and so on, but many not without negative effect, some of which were long-lasting. Many writers, traveler, have written stories that have this revolution as their setting. And one of those stories was written by Charles Dicken, and it's called A Tale of Two Cities. The passage the lighthouse has illuminated today comes from the last pages of the story, so a little bit of a spoiler alert there. It is where a man named Sidney Carton has decided to take the place of another character named Charles Darnay. Charles Darnay was originally sentenced for execution at the guillotine, but Carton, who looks like Darnay, decides to switch places with him discreetly and save his life so that Darnay might go on living with his wife and children. Now, Darnay's wife was a woman that Sidney was also in love with, but wanting her to be happy and wanting her to have her husband, he puts himself in Darnay's place. Only a few know what Sidney Carton has done. Now, as he is wheeled towards the guillotine to make his sacrifice, Dickens writes these beautiful lines that the lighthouse has illuminated for us today. So let's open to that passage and see what ideas and principles the lighthouse has in store for us. They said of him about the city that night that it was the peacefulest man's face ever beheld there. Many added that he looked sublime and prophetic. One of the most remarkable sufferers by the same axe, a woman, had asked at the foot of the same scaffold not long before to be allowed to write down the thoughts that were inspiring her. If he had given any utterance to his, and they were prophetic, they would have been these. I see Brassard and Clyne Defarge, the vengeance, the juryman, the judge, long ranks of the new oppressors who have risen on the destruction of the old, perishing by this retributive instrument before it shall cease out of its present use. I see a beautiful city and a brilliant people rising from this abyss, and in their struggles to be truly free, in their triumphs and defeats through long years to come, I see the evil of this time, and of the previous time of which this is the natural birth, gradually making expiation for itself and wearing out. I see the lives for which I lay down my life, peaceful, useful, prosperous, and happy, in that England which I shall see no more. I see her with a child upon her bosom, who bears my name. I see her father, aged and bent, but otherwise restored, and faithful to all men in his healing office and at peace. I see the good old man, so long their friend, in 10 years' time enriching them with all he has, and passing tranquilly to his reward. I see that I hold a sanctuary in their hearts, and in the hearts of the descendants generations hence. I see her, an old woman, weeping for me on the anniversary of this day. I see her and her husband, their course done, lying side by side in their last earthly bed, and I know that each was not more honored and held sacred in the other's soul than I was in the souls of both. I see that child who lay upon her bosom and who bore my name, a man winning his way up in that path of life which once was mine. I see him winning it so well that my name is made illustrious there by the light of his. I see the blots I threw upon it faded away. I see him, foremost of just judges and honored men, bringing a boy of my name, with a forehead that I know and golden hair, to this place, then fair to look upon, with not a trace of this day's disfigurement. And I hear him tell the child my story, with a tender and a faltering voice. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. And that's where our passage ends, traveler. Wow, traveler. Those words are powerful. Powerful indeed. Oh, excuse me while I go get a tissue, traveler. There. Can you feel and see the strength and the peace and the power that come from those words? There are so many things to unpack there. Now, I think the Lighthouse would have us look at a few ideas here, and we'll get to that last line. But first, let's look at some of the things Sidney says before he gets to that last powerful summation of his experience and his heart. Firstly, we read that the people in the city saw Sidney before he was wheeled to the guillotine and remarked about how much peace he had in his facial expression. So cool. I love that Charles Dickens highlights that aspect. And then at the very scaffold or place of the guillotine, we see that a woman writes down her thoughts of inspiration that she's having before her execution sentence is carried out. And Charles Dickens, on the same vein, tells us the thoughts of Sidney Carton just before his execution. And his thoughts, traveler, are remarkable, as we read. I love how Sidney continues to say, I see. He repeats it over and over again. And everything he sees is so filled with hope. The end of the terror in the revolution, the rising of the city and its people from an abyss. And he sees those people that he is specifically laying down his life for, the happiness he hopes for them, and that what he does at that moment will be remembered for good. I love that, traveler. And I'm reminded of the sacrifices that we make right now in our lives. We make small sacrifices day in and day out. Maybe we refrain from eating that donut, or maybe we help someone move a large piece of furniture when we could do something else during that time. But then there are times we make larger sacrifices, life-altering type of sacrifices that carry great weight, that take courage, perhaps the courage of Sidney Carton. And when we sacrifice something, traveler, I don't think it's just giving something up, but giving something up with the hope of something better that perhaps we cannot yet see, at least with our eyes. Now, in this passage, Sidney says that he sees what his sacrifice will do. But he's not talking about seeing with his eyes, traveler. There is a scripture from the Epistle to the Hebrews in the New Testament that connects to this idea of seeing what a sacrifice will do in the future. It's Hebrews chapter 11, verses 13 through 16, and I believe we'll see how this connects to Sidney's words. It says, "These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly." There's so many cool connections there, traveler. The seeing of promises afar off and embracing them, just as Sidney saw. Seeking a better country, which Sidney saw would happen for him. But country can also mean our place of dwelling or surroundings. And Sidney also saw that his rest, the dwelling he was going to, would be better than anything he had known. And traveler, that is what I feel is the greatest lesson the Lighthouse would have us take from this passage. That when we sacrifice for goodness and for God, which are the same thing, it is a far greater thing than we could have done otherwise. And we are entering into that country that is a far greater rest than previously felt. Even if the storm of life is raging around us, or if people are jeering and mocking us as we are wheeled to the scaffolding and the guillotines, as happened to many people who experienced that at the time of the French Revolution, the rest we receive from sacrificing for the right will surpass any storm or any jeering we may face. Now, we are not perfect, traveler. We are not. Nor are we supposed to be in an instant, a day, a week, or year, and so on. But we are learning to seek that country. We are learning that choosing God and what is right will be something we will never regret. It is hard to do, and sometimes very hard to do. But God will help us. He will stand with you and I. He will stand on the scaffolding as we face the unjust guillotines, storms, and jeering crowds of life. And in Him, we can and shall have peace that surpasses understanding. I invite us both, traveler, to see with an eye of faith the good country as Sidney did, to see what goodness our sacrifices will bring for those we love and perhaps people we have yet to meet. And I know, as we strive to choose God, we will have a far greater rest than we have ever known. Farewell, traveler. I wish you the best on your journey, and I look forward to seeing you next time.